Welcome to part 2 of the Groups and Groupings tutorial. Let's take a look at what happens when you want to subdivide your groups of students even further. Groups and groupings are distinguished as two separate levels of subdividing your students. Groups is the lowest and simplest level, and groupings are groups of groups. So if I have multiple groups, such as the bell jar and To Kill a Mockingbird, I can collect both of those groups into one grouping. When might this be useful? Well, right now I've got two groups here, the bell jar and To Kill a Mockingbird. But say these are my period 2 students in a high school school day. What about my period 4 students and my period 8 students? Those students might be reading the same books or perhaps even different books again. I want to put those students into separate groupings, even though they have little work groups inside of their own periods. Let me show you how it works. First, I need to edit the two groups that I just made. Let me take a look at the bell jar, and I'm going to click Edit Group Settings. I'm going to change the name of this to be the bell jar, period 2. Save my changes, and do the same thing to Kill a Mockingbird. Now I'm only changing the naming here. This isn't the process of setting up the groupings. I'm just doing this so that you find it easier to follow. The bell jar and To Kill a Mockingbird are being read in my period 2 class. What are my period 4 students doing? Let's create another group. In period 4, my students might be reading For Whom the Bell Tolls. Still other students might be reading Catch-22. Now I've got 4 different groups. Whoops, forgot to make Catch-22 into the period 4 distinction. I want to make sure you guys can see that. So I've got some period 2 and some period 4. Well, how do I subdivide those even further so that my period 4 students can stay with each other and my period 2 students can stay with each other? I need to head over to the Groupings tab. First I'm going to start by creating a grouping called period 2. And to that grouping, I can add groups. Remember, groups are the smaller level. Groupings are groups of groups. So I head over to the right-hand side of my screen where I can adjust the groups that are in this grouping. Click on the little people icon and move over my period 2 groups into my period 2 grouping. Back to groupings, and I can do the same thing for period 4. Groups in this grouping, period 4. Back on my groupings page, I can see that there are no activities assigned to this grouping. This is the crucial part of grouping. You can assign individual activities to a grouping, and only that grouping can see the activity. You'll see that in just a minute. Let's take a quick look at the Overview tab, which is a nice way for you to see what students are assigned in groups and what groupings encompass those groups. So a great overview page that you can take a look at as a reference. Let's head back and see how the groupings now function. In the last tutorial, I set up this book chat. In the book chat, I used the Separate Groups feature to make sure that my To Kill a Mockingbird students only saw each other's discussion posts, and that my bell jar students only saw each other's posts. Well, what if I wanted to create a separate activity for period 2 entirely? Maybe I'd like period 2 to work on a wiki, where period 4 should be working on the book chat. I can do that now that I have groupings. I'm going to enter the book chat activity and choose Update this forum. I'd like to reserve this book chat for only my period 4 students. I'm going to come to the bottom of the screen and turn on my Advanced Options. Advanced Option reveals the grouping to whom I can assign this activity, and I'm going to select period 4. I'm also going to check the box that reads that this is available for those group members only. My periods 2 students won't even see that a book chat forum exists on my course page. Save and return to course, and as the teacher, I see that this activity is assigned to a particular grouping. Now, what do my period 2 students see? I'm going to sign in as a period 2 student, such as Jessica Moodler. visit the Google Earth course, and the book chat is gone. Now, is it necessarily applicable to your subject matter or to your situation that you would have multiple sections of students, all of whom reading different separate groups of books? No, probably not. But when might you find this useful? Well, in some courses, you might have multiple sections where one group gets ahead of the other. Maybe you have a period 2 English and a period 4 English that are the same subject matter, and you just want to make sure that one group has a certain extra activity available to them, and another group doesn't, or another period doesn't. You also might find this useful when you're working with students who might be trusted with certain additional permissions. For example, you might want to put into a grouping students who have the right to edit a wiki together. And some students who don't have those permissions anymore, you could funnel into a separate grouping where those opportunities aren't available. You can also use this for special education classes, where certain activities that are specially available to those students would be seen just by them. The last part of the groupings demonstration I want to show you happens when I sign back in as me, out of Jessica Moodler. Just because we have separate sections of students divided into groups doesn't mean you have to have lots of different groups in order to use this function where they're only available to one particular grouping. Let me show you what I mean. If I come into my groups area, I'm going to get rid of my period 4 groups altogether. Maybe I don't teach 2 different sections that need to be in the same course. Maybe I only teach period 2 English and they're working together. But perhaps my bell jar kids are going to be completing a PowerPoint assignment for their final project, and my Kill a Mockingbird kids are going to be editing a wiki together. I just want to make those assignments available to those students. That's no problem. The problem is, I can't make an assignment visible to only a group. I can only make it visible to one group if they're in a grouping. I liken this to the Olympics. Just because you're on the United States Olympic team doesn't mean you can be there without first having a sport. I need to be a swimmer or an ice skater or a track and field runner before I can be a part of the Olympic team. The same thing is true in Moodle. You have to be a part of a group before you can be a part of a grouping. Remember, groupings are groups of groups. So, let me come over into the groupings area, and what I'm going to do is trash these groupings I created before. Let's just get rid of them and start fresh. Delete, and delete again. Instead, this time I'm going to create 2 groupings that are exactly the same title as the 2 groups I made. When I click Create Grouping, I'm going to create a To Kill a Mockingbird grouping, and a bell jar grouping. And while it might seem redundant, I'm going to place the bell jar group into the bell jar grouping. Why? Because I want to make some activities only visible to the bell jar students. And I can't do that if they're just in a group. They have to be in a grouping. Have I lost you yet? Okay, so now I've got these 2 groupings set up and they have the right groups inside of them. Let's go back to the front page and let's make sure this book chat is available just to one grouping. I'm going to make the book chat available to the Kill a Mockingbird kids. And I can create another area for my bell jar kids, such as a wiki or another kind of activity, maybe the PowerPoint upload they're going to complete. That's how that works. So let's do a quick review. First, groups are the smallest level of subdivisions of students. You can use groups in order to separate the activity done in the same learning opportunity in Moodle. So the discussion posts that are posted in this forum will be only seen by the students who are in your same group. Alternately, you can create groupings, which are groups of groups, so that the entire activity is only visible to a certain amount of students. This can only be done if you make your groups funneled into groupings as well. Activities can only be hidden at the groupings level, not just groups. Still have questions? Head to Moodle.org and look up groups and groupings. The frequently asked questions page is particularly helpful.